Starting off this countdown, we have absolving sins with money. Basically, back in the day, the Catholic Church told people that they could absolve their sins and get a ticket to heaven if they just paid them. Like, you were paying the church for forgiveness. Sorry, that's not how these things work. It also got to the point where people were paying for future sins. Not only that, they claimed that for a fee, relatives could get their deceased loved ones out of purgatory. And people fell for this all. Not only that, but poor people thought that they were screwed. They're like, if we sin, it's over. We can't afford to pay to get our sins forgiven. I wouldn't be surprised if the rich went around committing crimes and killing people, then being like, here's some cash, I'm all good now, thanks. In our 9th spot, we have imprisoning Galileo. In 1663, Galileo was like, science is greater than God. He also said that the sun was the center of the universe and claimed that the earth moved around it. I mean, he was on to something there, but just, he was slightly off. Anyways, the church didn't like these claims because it conflicted with the teachings of the church, so they imprisoned him. He was imprisoned in his home for years. I mean, they threatened him with torture, imprisonment, and even being burned at the stake, so let's just say he got off easy compared to those other punishments. It wasn't until 350 years later did the church be like, okay, yes, we agree, Galileo was onto something. Moving on to number 8, we have cutting funding. For years, the church gave thousands of dollars to a non-profit organization, Compañeros, that would help Hispanic immigrants get access to healthcare, among other things. That was until they found out that Compañeros supported a gay and lesbian rights group. So the church cut the funding to this company for their connection to the LGBTQ2S+ community. They're not the only group that the church has done this to, though. No, apparently, and I quote, since 2010, 9 groups from across the country have lost financing from the campaign because of conflicts with Catholic principles. Moving on to number 7, we have the gay clergy member. In 2018, a secret Catholic group came forward claiming they had information all about their clergy member, Monsignor Jeffrey Burrell. They claimed that he was using the gay male dating app Grindr and would visit gay bars weekly. Now, let me just say, there's nothing wrong with being gay. What's wrong is shaming this poor man and outing him, and the poor man had to resign. Obviously, this is something the Catholic Church doesn't want us to know. Why? Because they say homosexual acts is immoral and contrary to the natural law. They also say homosexual tendencies are objectively disordered. And they also preach celibacy. So having a clergy member that is gay is highly controversial for them, and they tried to hide it. A lot of Catholics were outraged when word got out. Scariest part is how they found out about Jeffrey in the first place. Apparently the group was tracking his movements based on the apps he was using. Pretty terrifying and also very, very wrong. Moving on to number 6, we have Joan of Arc. Turns out that the church wasn't the biggest fan of Joan of Arc. In fact, at one point she was pretty much the Catholic Church's #1 public enemy. Long story short, she believed that God was speaking to her and had told her to start an uprising to get the English out of France. By doing so, she pissed off some high-powered Catholics who wanted her gone. So they decided to put her up for trial. But legit, they had no evidence against her, but they were like, whatever, fake it till you make it, right? So they just accused her of heresy with no evidence, cause it was a lie. And on top of that, they denied her counsel, which was against the church's rules. They just hated her and wanted to get rid of her. I think there were like 70+ charges brought up against her. One of them being for wearing men's clothing, in which she was burned at the stake for. In 1431, in front of a crowd of thousands of people, they lit her on fire for wearing male clothing. But it was discovered after her death that she never even did this. Literally, they killed an innocent woman. Why? Because they were probably intimidated by her. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the slaying of women. Pope Innocent VII wasn't innocent at all. In fact, he was terrified of witches. He said that they were real and a huge threat. So he created a huge witch hunt. He dispatched his men to Germany to try witches. And due to the pressure he put on them, countless innocent women were killed after being accused of being witches. All because Pope Innocent was paranoid as hell. Not only that, but in 1487 a book was written all about these witches. It said that this book promoted burning them at the stake stake, and that influenced a number of killings. Plus, the book was just filled with lies, like saying these women would stop cows from producing milk and would ride on broomsticks in the air. It's just truly messed up and spread misinformation and paranoia. In our fourth spot, we have the burning of the dead. Apparently, the church holds grudges because 43 years after John Wycliffe passed away, they had his body dug up and burned. Now, let me explain how it got to this point. So, John saw fault in the Roman Catholic Church and saw how it was corrupt. So he believed that people should worship God and Jesus according to the Bible, not according to the popes and their bishops and priests, because people are corrupt. But the Bible is not. He also believed that people should interpret the Bible for themselves and not how other people tell them to interpret it. Well, the church did not like this at all. So when he passed away, they ordered all his books to be burned. They also ordered for his body to be unburied. And for some reason, it took them years to get this all done. So 43 years later, his body was finally unburied and then torched, and then his ashes were just thrown into the river. In our third spot, we have the misuse of power. Just this year, it was discovered that the French clergy had taken advantage of over 200,000 young individuals since the 1950s. It is absolutely disgusting. The height of this happened between the 1950s to the 1970s. That's when most of the cases were discovered. Then there was a resurgence of cases in the early 1990s. And obviously the Catholic Church doesn't want anyone to know about this. In fact, it's obvious that the church was turning a blind eye to the perpetrators. They were more focused on protecting themselves and their reputation. They did not care for the victims at all. A report said, and I quote, "The Catholic Church's immediate reaction was to protect itself as an institution, and it has shown complete, even cruel indifference to those having suffered abuse." Like I said, it's absolutely disgusting. Moving on to number 2, we have the number of priests. In January of 2002, it was discovered that 234 priests have had allegations of sexual misconduct made against them in the last 50 years. You heard me, 234. That just makes me sick to my stomach. These individuals are using their title and control to take advantage of others. Some of the victims did file lawsuits against a number of dioceses and got multiple $million-dollar settlements in some cases, but that still does not take away their trauma and their PTSD. Even though the Catholic Church held a worldwide summit to talk about all this, it wasn't that effective, as priests were still caught taking advantage of individuals years later. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Inquisitions. It should not be forgotten that the Catholic Church would routinely arrest and torture Jews, Muslims, along with other individuals of different religions. They literally were like, convert to our beliefs or be executed, it's your choice. They were given a warning. They were told to vacate the area, and the people that stayed were arrested and then either forced to convert or be executed. Sometimes they even tortured them before execution. They used branding, would hang them from their thumbs or toes, and would break their bones. After that, that's when they were strangled and then burned at the stake.
Cathedral Ghosts scares us in at number 10. This creepy video was captured at the Lincoln Cathedral in England. First of all, the exterior of this church looks like it could be the set of a horror movie, and what possessed this person to go to church at night? I have no idea. Well, it's a little bit too dark and windy for my liking. Well, things took a turn for the worse when they stumbled across this. Well, take a look for yourself. Okay, did I see that right? It looks like a face is protruding from the wall, and then all of a sudden it disappears when the cameraman went to investigate it. I'd be getting the heck out of there, and I'd probably never return to that church ever again. I'd probably have to make a pit stop to another church because I have to do some Hail Marys after seeing that ghost head. A creepy art project is up next at number 9. The St. George Church was left abandoned after the roof collapsed. The locals in the area saw this as a bad omen, so they didn't even want to repair the church. But I guess an art student took it upon themselves to fill in the pews with creepy ghost figures instead. Take a look. Okay, this is not okay in my books. Actually, this might be the scariest art project that I've ever seen. I feel like if the church wasn't haunted before, well, it definitely is now. A shadowy figure is up next at number 8. This extremely scary picture was taken inside of a Catholic church somewhere over in Poland. Everyone there was celebrating a First Communion, but the party was crashed by the shadowy figure who was seen creeping between the aisles. It's quite possible that this is just a result of a camera malfunctioning, but the thing is, are you willing to bet your life on that? I know I'm not. Insane insect infestation crawls onto our list at number 7. I get it, sometimes older buildings have an insect problem. You might see the occasional ant or centipede. You know, I can forgive that, but what I can't forgive is this. Is this real life right now? Is this the only church in town? Why are people content with this? How the heck can you be singing at a time like this? I mean, you all need to bathe in some holy water and all stand in front of a strong fan to get all of those termites off of you. This is not okay. I'm pretty sure this church needs an exorcism and an exterminator at the same time. Number 6, the man with glowing eyes. During a service at a church, someone accidentally captured this picture of a man with some pretty unsettling eyes. Some people are even saying that this creature isn't even human, while others think that he's wearing glasses and it's just the light reflecting off of them. I honestly don't know what to believe. He kind of looks like a gnome from hell, and those people in the church might be in a whole lot of trouble. But did you guys also notice there's a weird floating object hovering over the guy next to the gnome? I mean, what the heck is going on in this church? I think everyone inside needs to be blessed. Bringing us to number 5, we have a ghost spirit caught on camera. A paranormal investigation team were exploring an old abandoned church in England, when they stumbled across this eerie sight. Okay, let's play that again, but in slow motion. As you can see, a ghostly figure passes by one of the windows, and it looks like they're wearing a long white dress or robe of some sort. This church dates back to 1135, so it's very possible that it's had its fair share of scary ghost encounters. Next up on our list, number 4, we have a Jesus statue caught moving. Okay, pay close attention to the statue's eyes, because what I'm about to show you guys is gonna happen pretty quickly. Okay, let's play that again, but in slow motion. How the heck did the guy filming this have no reaction whatsoever? I'm completely traumatized, and I wasn't even there for that. I feel like Jesus was staring into my soul, and he didn't even like what he saw, so he just closed his eyes. This statue of Jesus Christ is located inside of the church in Mexico, and since this video was released, thousands of people have been going to this church to watch the statue move for themselves. But I'm pretty sure a moving statue would just deter me from ever visiting it. A ghost makes an appearance at a shrine, and this takes us to number 3. This next clip I'm about to show you guys was taken in a church over in Ireland. This church houses the national shrine of Saint Oliver Plunkett, who was an Irish saint who was condemned to death. And that was although he was completely innocent. So you're gonna see his cell door and possibly Saint Oliver Plunkett himself. Watch.
This is the door of the cell in Newgate prison, where St Oliver Plunkett was in prison for 8 months.
He's a very interesting figure, because he was...
Okay, no, you're not crazy. I think I saw him as well. So it could be possible that his spirit is still attached to the cell door, or could something more sinister be going on here? Well, you know what? I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Jesus is caught moving again, and this takes us to number 2. Seriously, what is up with all these moving Jesus statues? Stop it! I'm really not okay with this, but you guys clicked on this video, so you know what? Here's another scary clip for you.
Reconozcan al Señor Jesús como el Hijo amado que el Padre ha enviado para salvación de todos.
Okay, what did I just watch? This is the reason why I don't go to church. There's too much scariness happening there. I think I'm developing an irrational fear of Jesus statues. I thought church was supposed to be a safe place, but instead of being comforted, I'm being tormented. Dark shadowy figure creeps onto our list at number 1. Well, take a look at this picture right here. It looks like the church might have a demon problem, maybe multiple demons. I don't know what's worse, those termites that we just saw or this devilish demon. And I can't even make out what this thing is. It looks like he has really long arms and legs. Maybe he's a spider demon. Well, whatever he is, I never want to see him in the flesh because I honestly don't think that I would be walking out of that church alive.
Starting off this countdown, we have the nuns. In 2019, Pope Francis for the first time addressed the horrors that happened to nuns in the Catholic Church. Priests and bishops and other church officials have been taking advantage of nuns for ages. This was an ongoing problem for years, and the church wasn't doing anything about it. They were too busy focusing on covering up even bigger scandals and issues. Over the years, more and more nuns have come forward saying that they were victims. Some were afraid to speak up because they were dependent on the church and literally couldn't leave. Although Pope Francis acknowledged what happened, it's unclear the steps they are taking to prevent it in the future. In our 9th spot today, we have the Knights Templar. So Philip IV of France, as well as the Catholic Church, are directly responsible for torturing and executing innocent individuals back in the 14th century. Basically, Philip did not like the Templars in Spain and wanted to get rid of them. So he sent out his men to round them up, arrest them, and then imprison them. He then accused the innocent men of terrible crimes like sodomy, heresy, and renouncing Christ. Any of those crimes were punishable by the death penalty. Again, they were innocent, he just wanted to get rid of the Templar order. He then would torture the Templars so that they would confess. He would use a rack to stretch out their shoulders until they dislocated, or he would have their private parts smashed. This was all done while the church knew that the men were innocent. In our 8th spot, we have Pope Pius XII. In this case, it's what the church didn't do. According to a recent discovery of archives, Pope Pius XII was fully aware what the Nazis were doing during the Holocaust and chose to remain silent. He knew of the mass executions of the Jewish individuals and he dismissed this all. In fact, he said that they were unable to confirm the crimes, so that's why he didn't speak up against them. It says a lot when they refuse to publicly condemn the Nazis. In fact, apparently his silence was so that the Germans didn't come for them, so that the church could always be successful. They were just caring about themselves and not about the thousands of innocent individuals being killed. Moving on to number 7, we have the violent murders. Back in 1095, Pope Urban II gave rise to the Crusades during his reign as the head of the Catholic Church. He called all Christians in Europe to go to war against the Muslims. And it was not pretty. It literally said that they killed so many Muslims that the street ran with blood. And this was only the beginning. Waves of crusades continued until 1396, and although Catholics were not the only religion involved in mass violence, Pope Urban got it all started. And it was a violent time to say the least. Everyone was killed, no matter their age. Some people's heads were even put on sticks and then they would carry them around to scare others. Like, that is hella messed up. In our 6th spot today, we have William Tyndale. During the 16th century, William took it upon himself to translate the Bible into vernacular English so that more people were able to read it. But for some reason, the Catholic Church did not like him doing this, which is weird. Wouldn't they want the Bible translated so more people would become followers of it? Anyways, William actually had to go into hiding because the church was coming for him. They even burned copies of the Bible that were being smuggled around Europe. In the end, William was captured, tried for heresy, and then burned at the stake. He literally did nothing wrong. Want to know something even more messed up? Years later, the church was like, ah yes, let's translate the Bibles. They then turned to William's translations and used a whole lot of it, and then they never even apologized. Ridiculous. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Pope Alexander VI. So, Pope Alexander VI was said to be one of the worst popes in history. Why? Well, he is known for something known as the Banquet of Chestnuts. He basically invited 50 women over and told them to strip for him. Then he threw chestnuts on the floor and forced the women to get on their hands and knees and just surround their feet like animals. To make matters worse, he told the men that he invited that he would give the man who could get it on with the most women jewelry or fine clothes. So then they were all fighting over these women. This guy was hella corrupt and sick. Not only that, but he liked to watch horses get it on. That is disgusting. In our 4th spot today, we have the cover-ups. So a lot of shady stuff has gone down with the Catholic Church. There's no denying that. For years, the church knew all about the scandals surrounding the leaders of the church and how they would take advantage of innocent individuals, but they kept brushing this issue under the rug. Then in 2001, the Vatican told them that any cases should be reported directly to the Vatican hierarchy. Years later, they still weren't dealing with any of these cases. In 2004, instead of getting rid of the priests in question, they just moved them to different churches or different countries. So that didn't really stop them. They just had a new set of people that they could take advantage of. They literally cared more about their priests than the victims. Moving on to number 3, we have the grooming. Over the years, people of power at the church have groomed a number of young individuals. Today, I'm sharing the story of Michael. When he was young, he was groomed and forced into doing things he didn't want to do. One of the brothers of the church would bring him to Broadway shows and movies. This was all part of the grooming process. Then when he entered the congregation of Christian brothers, that's when he was abused and groomed by 4 or 5 different men. This is absolutely disgusting, and of course the church would do any and everything to make sure Michael's story or others didn't get out. In our second spot, we have the funding. CBC News and the Globe and Mail recently obtained files that expose the Catholic Church for spending some of the $79 million that it agreed to pay residential school survivors. That's right, they spent money that was meant to go to survivors of their residential schools. But instead, they took most of that money and put it into things like their Bible study group or for their personal lawyers and unapproved loans. Whereas other churches, including the Anglican, United, and Presbyterian Church, paid the full amount of compensation owed to the survivors without an issue. But the Catholic Church took the money and used it for themselves, which is disgusting since they played the biggest role in residential schools and the horrors that took place there. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the unmarked graves. Earlier this year, thousands of unmarked graves have been found by residential schools across Canada. Residential schools were funded by the federal government and run by the churches. They would tear families apart, taking the children and forcing them into these schools in order to assimilate them, and they were stripped of their native language and culture and traditions. While in the schools, they were treated terribly. They were neglected, tortured, and even murdered. In these unmarked graves, thousands of innocent young individuals were found. This went on for 120 years. Tens of thousands of Indigenous children were sent to these schools. Thousands never returned home. Currently, the grounds are being searched for unmarked graves at the Mohawk Institute, and soon more and more residential school grounds will be explored. And sadly, we all know more bones are going to be unearthed. It's a very sad and tragic reality.
Number 10, the Duomo of Florence, Italy. This is one of the coolest places I've ever been, and I had to put it on this list. I've been to Italy once in my life, and this was the highlight of the trip for me, and I did not expect it to be, because I was like, oh, this is a really beautiful church, and then I was like, whoa, living Assassin's Creed, and it was amazing. Besides living out your Assassin's Creed Ezio dreams, not only is the cathedral stunning, but the trip to the top is nothing like you'd expect. I walked in expecting to solely marvel at the frescoes immediately inside, which are breathtaking, but then there was a guy by a small door where you could pay to travel the 463 steps it takes to get to the top. I'm not the one to skip a leg day, so challenge accepted. It wasn't just a spiral staircase, which honestly thank goodness because I would have but anyways, it was that plus scaling steep narrow pathways and traveling through narrow tunnels. Whoever pictured monks as rounded and out of shape was dead wrong, especially if they were climbing that every day. Number 9, the Braunston Goddess. You would expect statues of the Virgin Mary and Jesus to be present in churchyards and chapels, but this little stone sculpture isn't really as self-explanatory. In the 1920s in Braunston and Rutland, their All Saints Church front steps needed replacing. As they removed the stones, they came across this strange little sculpture. With 2 noses, a tongue sticking out, protruding breasts and bulging eyes, no one could quite place who or what it was supposed to be. Some believe it's a medieval guardian sculpture to frighten off evil spirits, or some kind of malicious monarch depiction, or even a pagan deity, but the style of carving doesn't match anything previously known, so it could be anything and remains a mystery to this day. Number 8, the Devil's Footprints. Ooh. One night, the devil himself, for whatever reason, tried to steal the bell from the tower of St. Dave's Church in Lanarth. A vicar, however, awoke to the noise and chased the fiend into the graveyard, and the man's foot ignited a fiery footprint on the stone before he left. A similar case befell St. Mary's Churchyard in Newington, Kent, but this time the devil succeeded in stealing the bells. I don't know what it is about the devil and bells, he just loves them, he wants them for himself. The devil leapt from the tower with the bells in a bag and left a fiery footprint on a stone before he left. He accidentally dropped the bells into a stream in his escape, and a local witch said that in order to retrieve them, they'd need 4 pure white cows. When they found the cows seemed to be doing the job until an onlooker was like, "Look, there's a black dot on one of them," and then the bells went back into the stream because they weren't pure white. But you can actually visit the stone with said footprint atop it, and it is said that if you place a finger on top and walk around it 3 times, it will bring you good luck. Better luck than the devil had, at least. He just couldn't get a handle on those bells. Number 7. St. Catherine of Siena's head. There's gonna be a lot of heads on this list, so get ready for a lot of head puns. Out of all the heads we are going to discuss today, Catherine's looks the best. Like, she's got some kind of secret to the whole like decomposition thing. Like, she looks pretty good. When she was just 7 years old, Catherine had visions that led her to pursue a life in the church with fervor. Her family tried to marry her off, so she cut her hair and scalded her body and ran off to become a nun. When she joined the nunnery, she had a powerful vision of Jesus placing a ring made of his skin, the flesh that was removed during his circumcision, which was revered at the time for some reason, and claimed Catherine in marriage. For the rest of her life, Catherine claimed that she could always see the flesh ring on her finger. Her miracles included levitating during prayer and receiving stigmata, which are holy bodily marks. She died in Rome, but people in Siena, her hometown, wanted a part of her there, so they went to Rome and stole her head. When the guards caught them, they prayed to Catherine, and when the guards looked in the bag, it was entirely filled with rose petals. When the guards left, the head returned, and it is said that that was her final miracle. They also have a piece of her thumb, which isn't mentioned in the story, but I assume that turned into a rose petal as well. Number 6. The tongue and jaw of St. Anthony. Have you ever seen an 800-year-old tongue? Do you want to? Well, you're in luck. Okay, so we've talked about heads being prized, but this church decided to go ahead and covet something else instead. St. Anthony was known for giving terrific and captivating sermons all across Italy and France that seemed to have a unique pull to them. Due to his work in life, Anthony was canonized after his death, but it took 30 years for his body to be exhumed and buried in a new basilica. It was then that they discovered that his tongue and jaw looked miraculously like it hadn't decomposed a single day. So they buried the rest of his body and put the jaw and tongue in a sacred display case. St. Anthony is the saint of lost things, and people go there to pray to him that they will find what they've lost. Hopefully Anthony doesn't feel like he lost anything when they took his tongue. The Church of Transfiguration. This church is interesting not because of what you may find inside it, but because of what you won't. Should you choose to visit Kizzy Island, you may want to spend some time at the Church of Transfiguration to marvel at the architecture and learn more about the unique way it was built. The church was entirely constructed out of wood and does not include a single nail or screw. The entire church is holding itself together through a series of intricately placed interlocking logs. Now, some when they think of that would be picturing like a simple log cabin kind of thing, but no, it's incredibly intricate and features rounded teardrop domes and fine points, so what an incredible architectural feat. Number 4. St. John's head. Another one. Imagine having a head everyone wants to get their hands on. Like, just imagine being that person. This object, it sounds weird to be calling it an object. Anyways, this weird preserved head has been found in several places across the globe, and unless St. John the Baptist had several heads, they can't all be the real thing. And also, how did you even find it? But the most famous places you can go to decide for yourself are the Basilica of St. Sylvester I in Rome, or the St. Den's Church in Munich, Germany. Both claim to have the head on display for all to see of the legendary John the Baptist. Except in Rome, they've chosen to serve it up on a silver platter, while in Munich, they've cloaked it in fine fabric and jewels. The head also appears in Damascus in a mosque, also covered by fabric. So, I don't know, maybe the skull takes turns? Who knows? Okay, we're getting to our top 3, guys. If you like this video, you know what to do. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, because it helps us out and we love you for it. And also lets us know we're doing a good job. Number 3. The head of Oliver Plunkett. Here is yet another church that's ahead of its game. Oliver Plunkett was an Irish Catholic archbishop who died as a martyr and was the last in fact during the Popish plot. Long story short, when Henry VIII left the church, centuries of strife followed between the Catholics and the Protestants, which led to the alleged Popish plot. A rumored alleged plot by the Catholics to kill Charles II and put his Catholic brother James on the throne. Whether or not the plot was actually real, no one knows. Either way, Oliver Plunkett was arrested, drawn and quartered in 1681, and remains one of the most famous Catholic figures in Ireland to this day. After his death, his head was first brought to Rome and hidden in 1921, and now sits in St. Peter's Church in Drogheda, Ireland. He's got a scorch mark on his face because apparently someone tried to burn the head before it was saved by his friends. So it's there, you can see it, and there's only one of them this time. Number 2, the Sinead Chapel. So yes, today we are covering weird things found in churches, but what about churches found inside weird things? Located in Allouville, Belfast in northern France is a church inside an oak tree. Sinead Chapel, aka Chapel Oak as it translates to, honestly looks like a church designed for a scene in a Tim Burton film. The oak tree is over 800 years old, and legend says that William the Conqueror chose this tree to pray beneath before he left for England. When lightning hit the tree in the 17th century, it sealed the tree's fate as becoming a place of worship. There is an entire spiral staircase that surrounds the tree with 2 tiny chapels inside. It was later converted to a temple of reason to save it from French revolutionary atheists who tried to burn it down. But today it remains, and you can still visit it today. You can still visit it today either to pray or marvel at the spectacle. It's up to you. Number 1. Basilica of St. Ursula. A church made of bones. A sign of respect to a group of women made martyrs when they arrived in Rome. Basilica of St. Ursula in Cologne is the largest mosaic made from human body parts, and according to legend, they include the bones of an English princess named Ursula. St. Ursula lived somewhere between 300 to 600 AD and decided to go on a pilgrimage in Europe. But given the time as well as the fact that she was a princess, she could not travel alone. So she took a force of 1,000 virgin women with her. Their ship allegedly blew across the sea to Rome in a single day, but then another ambitious wind swept them off course to Cologne. Unfortunately for Ursula and her league, the Huns were ravaging Europe at that time and were captured shortly into their journey. The elegant way of saying what happened is to say that they were martyred, so we'll say that. Relics of the princess were housed in the basilica, but in the Middle Ages a pit of bones were discovered. The bones were believed to be those of the princess and her followers, and they were placed within the church so that they may finally be at rest. Unfortunately, due to forensic analysis, the bones also include men, dogs, and babies. So I guess there are a lot of questions here that need answers. So if they're not St. Ursula's, whose are they?
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have St. Mary the Virgin Church in Clophill in the United Kingdom. She may lay in ruins, but the chances are that this dilapidated building will ruin you. Sitting quiet in the sleepy old English village of Clophill, there is said to be a force of evil here. Blimey. Laying abandoned and in ruins is the Church of St. Mary the Virgin, built in 1350. Interestingly, the church's altar faces south, towards hell, rather than the traditional east, which is where churches usually face to point to heaven. Basically, a whole bunch of Christians believe that the south-facing altar was constructed on purpose, and that the church was secretly a satanic meeting spot. The church has a very long history of reported hauntings, and people believe that the satanic rituals still take place here. The graveyard was desecrated in the 1970s, so now all of the gravestones sit facing the perimeter wall, which kind of makes it even creepier. Coming into number 9, we have St. Paul's in New York. St. Paul's Chapel is often named the Little Chapel That Stood, and when you see pictures of it, you'll totally understand why. Built in 1766, the chapel now sits among skyscrapers at the base of the World Trade Center. It's the final resting place of Alexander Hamilton, the place that George Washington prayed on his inauguration day. It survived the Great Fire of New York and the 9/11 attacks, becoming a safe haven and spot of refuge for those who work to save people from the wreckage and put out the fires. All in all, it actually kinda sounds like a good place, so why is it so scary? I'll cut to the chase. There's a headless ghost here. A ghost without a head. Double the spooks. Actor George Frederick Cook was said to have donated his skull to the theatre to be used as the iconic piece in Hamlet. Good on him. He was buried sans head at the St. Paul Cemetery and is now said to wander the grounds looking for his, head. St. Paul isn't the worst of them for sure, I actually kind of think it's a bit quirky and I like the sound of a headless ghost. Coming into number 8 we have the Chernobyl Church. Has anyone watched Chernobyl on Netflix yet? I haven't, but I keep meaning to. I hear it's really good. Let me know if you have in the comment section. Anyway, on the 28th of April 1986, a nuclear reactor exploded at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near Pripyat. Since that day there has been a 10-kilometer exclusion zone that won't be safe to enter for a very long time. Nuclear cleanup is still too dangerous and is set for the year 2065, which is 80 years on from the disaster. Right now there are a whole load of abandoned places sitting there, poisoned and spooky. Some people have even broken into the exclusion zone to see them, although very much at their own risk. One adventurer came across this old, sad and abandoned church in Krasny village in the exclusion zone. Yikes! Abandoned and radioactive. Do you want to have a look inside? Of course you do! Honestly, like, so spooky. Spookier still, coming into number 7 we have Egg Hill Church in Pennsylvania. Egg Hill kinda sounds like a cute, sweet place, doesn't it? But actually, it really isn't. The now abandoned Egg Hill Church is rumored to be one of the more haunted buildings in the world, filled with unholy spirits. According to legend, a pastor arrived on the job in 1927 and shortly after he delivered his sermon, he decided to kill his entire flock as they took Holy Communion. Then, he killed himself by hanging himself. I can't confirm this with research, it's likely just an urban legend, but nonetheless a lot of people think that the building is extremely haunted and very hateful. Coming into number 6 we have St. Michan's Church in Dublin. Ireland. A country of so much rich history. Rich history can also be translated to a lot of dead people over the years too. It's kind of the case with this church. It was built in 1095 on the site of an old Norse chapel. It has a history of dead people extending back 1,000 years, which is bound to give a place a certain vibe. The church was rebuilt in 1686 and a large pipe organ was installed. Apparently Handel is said to have first played his Messiah. Despite the change in building structure, the crypt remains the same. Now the crypt is made of limestone, which is perfect for preserving mummies. Amongst the bodies in the crypt are an 800-year-old crusader, a 400-year-old nun, 2 brothers who took part in a rebellion against the British, a thief identified by their missing hands. Fact for you, up until July 2017, visitors were actually allowed to touch the mummies. Oddly, while the crypt is really good for preserving human remains, it seems that the wooden coffins that they're buried in just keep bursting open and exposing bodies. Ugh. Sadly, in February 2019, the crypt was broken into and bodies were assaulted. The head of the crusader was stolen and the nun's body was chopped and decapitated. Another body was turned over in its grave. So who would disrespect the dead like this? We don't know, but luckily the crusader's head was eventually found and returned to the body, but I'm thinking there are some angry mummies in that crypt. Coming into number 5 we have the Borgund Stave Church in Norway. I would love to go to Norway, but to me this is just looking creepy from the off. Creepy, but I have to say a little bit cool. It kind of looks less like a church and more so like a witch's mansion, or maybe the Weasley's burrow. I guess that is kind of a witch's and wizard's home, even if they're good ones, but still, it's creepy just to look at. The church is slap bang in the middle of a medieval cemetery, and it is made from wood, but has somehow stood for 1,000 years, which to me is even more weird. There are strange engravings of animals and mystical creatures inside, and ancient runes to boot. Here be witches? Dragons? The imagination runs wild. Do you like unexplained wailing sounds? If so, you will love this at number 4. We have the Church of St. Andrew on Staten Island. This church dates back to the early 1700s and is located in Richmond, Staten Island. The church was used as a hospital during the American Revolution, and it seems to have left a deep scar on the building. These days it is said that the spirits of the dead soldiers haunt the halls, wailing, walking, knocking, creeping, just generally being creepy little ghosts. Candles flicker without wind, and some claim to have seen them float. There's a chill in the air here, even on a hot, heavy summer's day. Coming into number 3 we have Oradour-sur-Glane Church in France. This is one of the saddest and scariest church stories of all time. War was an abysmal period of time for Europe, and between the two feuds, decades were lost to bloodshed. While the majority of the countries eventually recovered, deep scars were left in the land. A number of places that existed before simply didn't survive, including Oradour-sur-Glane. On the 10th of June 1944, German SS soldiers destroyed the French village, killing 642 of its inhabitants, with just 20 people managing to escape. The black shirts rounded up the men and shot them at point-blank range in a barn, but the church was a true horror. Women and children were rounded up into the village church, locked inside, and then burned alive as German soldiers set fire to the holy building. Hundreds of innocent people lost their lives in these walls. Honestly, I feel really bad for the people that had to go and find them there. French president of the time, Charles de Gaulle, ordered that the town remained untouched as a memorial to those who lost their lives in the savage attack. People can still visit the area and see the village left ransacked as it was that night. They can also see what remains of the church, if they dare. Coming into number 2, we have the Sedlec Ossuary in Czech Republic. It isn't the outside of this church that is the issue. Have a little look. See, no scarier than any other church, right? Well, my friends, step inside. This church is filled with the remains of 40 to 70,000 people, which, yikes. Not even that, like out of sight, out of mind. If they were buried somewhere or like in the walls, that would be fine. But this chapel is decorated with the bones and skulls of the dead. There are pillars made out of bones, a chandelier of bones, a coat of arms made from actual arms, and then like, I'm sorry, but why is there a skull on this cherub's knee? I'm honestly kind of petrified. Why are their skulls holding bones in their mouths? This is macabre and I don't like it. It seems that the church dates back to 1278, but in the early 16th century, bones were exhumed by a blind monk. A lot of the bones are thought to belong to plague victims. Ugh. So, how do you top a church made of bones? Ho ho ho. Get ready for number 1. We've got the Satanic Temple, a place that I don't want to be. Prayers to God will not help you in the Satanic Church, but you could pray to Lucifer, not that I would advise it. At the Satanic Church, unholy pastor Victor Damien Rousseau, who by the way claims that he is the son of the devil, suggests that people make a pact with Lucifer himself, his dad. Why? Well, so they can become rich and then the devil will own their soul. Classic. The Church of Lucifer is located in Colombia and actually does look pretty churchy. It seems that Rosa was raised Catholic but denounced God and turned to the devil. Do you want to look inside? I feel like you do. Check out this clip from a Vice documentary.
Una construcción grande con cruces invertidas. El templo visto desde afuera se ve solitario, cerrado y totalmente privado. Y para ser una iglesia no da mucho la bienvenida.
Víctor o Héctor?
I have to say, like, all joking aside, it does have some pretty sweet decor. Leather chairs, black curtains, big black and red satanic pentacles, backlit upside down crosses, and an altar to the Dark Lord himself. Can we just talk about how Lucifer's throwing the classic rock hand here, like Satan loves heavy metal? What a cliche. Locals have complained about the amount of animals ritually sacrificed by the group. Want to have a look at what a satanic ritual at the church looks like? Here you go.
Hay unos seguidores de él tiene una túnica roja, los otros una túnica negra y están a punto a mí de vestirme e investirme en la religión luciferina. Entonces ya veremos qué pasa después de esta noche.
I do enjoy a good candle, but honestly, this is all a bit intense for me, and culty. I really don't enjoy a cult, I just need to be free.
At number 10, we have the Temple of Amida in Japan. Let's kick off this list by flying over to Japan. The Japanese have some of the best ghost stories in history. I still have scenes from The Ring and The Grudge burned into my brain. Those were perfect movies for me to watch as a 13-year-old boy. I remember the girl in the closet who looks like she just got pushed through a trash compactor and then left out in the sun for 8 years. Yeah, when you're 13 and you see that out of nowhere, you don't forget it overnight. Well, this is a classic Japanese ghost story from the Temple of Amida that was built 700 years ago. Legend goes that a blind man was brought to play music for a dead emperor in the graveyard. He was led by a priest, but the blind dude didn't know he was playing music for a bunch of ghosts. The priest would cover his body in protective symbols so the spirits couldn't see him. But one time he brought the blind dude in, but he forgot to cover his ears, so the spirits cut his ears off. Then he died in the graveyard. It's said that you can still hear the blind guy's music playing in the graveyard graveyard. Ooh. At number 9 we have the Church of St. Nicholas in Plucky, England. We're gonna jump on a plane and fly over to jolly old England for the most haunted town in the UK. Plucky, England is a place where the hauntings are hot and the people still live there. Everyone knows you can live wherever you want, right? It's not the 1800s anymore where if you try to move to a new town half your family will die and it'll take you a year and a half. Plucky is so haunted that when Halloween rolls around they need to bring in more cops because so many drunk dummies come to the town to dress slutty and see if they can run into a phantom. And in this town is the Church of St. Nicholas, where the spirit of Lady During walks around looking for her dead kid. It's said that she was buried in 7 lead coffins, but it didn't stop her from breaking out and haunting the hell out of this church. I don't even think lead does anything to ghosts. I think it's supposed to be silver. They were probably like 7 silver coffins? Jesus Christ, that's expensive. Let's use lead and hope for the best. At number 8 we have the Chapel of Bones. Now it's time to head over to Portugal for one of the creepiest arts and crafts projects I've ever seen. Back in Portugal, somewhere in the 16th century, the cemeteries were getting too full. People were dying too quick. So when this happens, they need to dig up all the old already rotted bodies, take out the dry bones, and then plop the fresh bodies into the hole. Now usually when you got something like this happening, they take all the bones then make something like the Paris catacombs. But that's not what the monks of the Church of St. Francis wanted to do. They were like, hey, let's take all these dope bones and make a bone house so everyone can bone in it. No, they did build a chapel made of bones, but that's not why they built it. They built this clavicle castle to remind people they were going to die, so they should be good people before they die. They were literally like, you see this? You see this spooky skeleton house? Be a better person! It's made with concrete and using around 5,000 bones. I wonder if that's legal to do today. Like if I built a little doghouse made out of bones on my front yard for my dog and to scare kids off my lawn. Could I do that? At number 7 we have St. Andrew's Church in Selkirk, Manitoba. Get your winter coat, we're heading over to Selkirk, Manitoba to check out the Church of St. Andrew's. We're going all over the world with this one. By the end of this video you'll have no excuse not to check out a scary church. Unless you're like me and you're just not going to do that because that's a terrible way to spend your day. Well, the Church of St. Andrews is nicknamed St. Andrews on the Red because if you're lucky, you'll see a set of glowing red eyes in the church. Great, I put on all my nice clothes for church and I just pissed myself. People have also said that they've seen a ghost dude and a ghost lady walking around the graveyard. And my favorite haunting from this church is people have said they've seen a ghost car. What? I didn't know ghosts could have cars. This might be the only ghost with a car. If this is true, this guy for sure bangs. If you're the only dude in the afterlife with a ball and ride, you're getting laid. Dude, this ghost is probably just riding past the cemetery to pick up chicks. This dude could be driving the only Phantom Rolls-Royce Phantom. At number 6, we have the St. Mark's Episcopal Church in the UK. Back to England, guys. It's apparently the bell tower of this haunted church that is the hotspot for supernatural activity. Legend says that the stonemason who was building the tower fell to his death before the tower was finished, and then started haunting the workers who came to finish the tower. They pleased the spirit by building him his own room in the tower, which is so funny to me. They were like, we know you're upset that you're dead, but we all came together and got you something nice. Here's your room. There's a little bench in it, there's a memory foam mattress, and we know you're a stonemason, so we filled the bookcase full of the best books about stonemasonry. Do you like it? At number 5, we have St. George's Church in the Czech Republic. This church is old as hell. It was built in 1352. I'll bet money that this building is not up to code. Well, back in the day when this church was shiny and new, it didn't take long before the people thought it was cursed because fires kept breaking out in the darn thing. People kept going though. In the Czech Republic, they're not afraid of curses. But in 1968, when the roof collapsed on some people during a funeral, everyone decided to stop going to church. Kinda. They held mass outside. These guys really love God. Because there was now a massive hole in the roof, the townfolk needed to find a way to fix it. And they did this by playing up the whole curse story of the church. They put in some sculptures of shrouded figures in the church and then turned it into a haunted tourist attraction and raised enough money to fix the church. Oh, this one's kinda sweet. At number 4, we have Basilica of Our Lady of Good Health. We're in India, baby, in the town of Velankani, where the site of this church was picked because they saw spirits beforehand. They wanted the church to be haunted even before it was built. Interesting choice. There's several ghosts who have been walking around this place, primarily one of a woman and her young child, who people think is Mother Mary and Jesus himself. People have even said that they've been healed by these ghosts, but I think they're probably liars. At number 3, we have the Church of Bones. Another church covered in bones. Bricks must have been expensive back then. Well, this one is way crazier than the Bone House. It all started in 1278 when an abbot came to the spot where the church stands today with a handful of dirt. He said the dirt was from the site where Jesus was crucified, and then he dusted the land with it. Then everyone in Europe wanted to be buried there. It was the place to get buried, baby. So there were a ton of bodies there. Then in the 1800s they wanted to build a church there, so they had to dig up all the bodies, and it was one dude's job to stack all the bones. He made 6 pyramids of bones from 70,000 people. The bones were later used to decorate the whole church. There's a chandelier in there that has every bone from the human body. At number 2, we got Old Rock Church in Texas. We made it to America, where this little abandoned church is still a happening place. It was built between 1884 and 1886, but shut down not too long after because another church got built nearby. But that didn't stop this place from being a hotspot, because apparently ghosts still go there, especially on Sundays. This new church may have had a fresh coat of paint, but the Old Rock Church had followers so devoted they still came to church after they died. People have seen all sorts of ghosts and lights coming from this church, but the craziest haunting that happens there is when people hear a full choir singing. Damn, this place is lit! And number 1 on our list is Church of Greyfriars. For our first place, we shoot back over to England. The Church of Greyfriars was once the most haunted place in London, but now only the spire stands. And it's haunted for good reason. It's a burial place of the Queen known as the She-Wolf of France. She had her husband killed, King Edward II, by having a hot iron rod inserted into his anus so it would burn his insides. It's said you can still hear his screams. When she died, she was buried with her husband's heart on her chest. And on the full moon, her ghost will rise, clenching the beating heart of her dead husband. Yeah, you get killed by a hot poker in the butt and your screams echo out for eternity. That's how you get number 1 on this list.